back, squad. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Full Ride, the College Recruiting and Athletic Scholarship podcast, where our goal is very simple. Every week, we want to give you a winning play that's going to enable you to jumpstart and take control of the college recruiting process. And I am your host and coach, Kito Delgado, and you are in for another treat because we have another week where we have a special guest joining me. And this individual is a former Division I national champion. That's right, NCAA Division I national champion in track and field. And she's a former college coach. So back-to-back weeks with former student athletes and former college coaches. So if you, after listening to this episode, I highly encourage you to go back and listen to last week's episode with Joy Walker, because she also gave you guys some great tips and share some awesome, knowledge with our families. But this is a longer interview, so I want to get right to it. I do want to encourage you, if you want to really jumpstart the recruiting process in the right way, in the show notes, I'm going to include a link for you to click how to avoid these 10 recruiting mistakes. It's basically the top 10 recruiting mistakes I want you to avoid. You click that link, drop us your email, and we'll send you that right over in your inbox. But without further ado, I hope you enjoy this week's episode with a former student athlete and college coach. Deshaya, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. It was a beautiful day. Yay.
Yes. Well, I didn't even bother reading your bio to our listeners in my introduction. I just said we have a special guest who is a former student athlete. That's all I gave him. So why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners and let them know a little bit about yourself, what sport you played, where you played, and then even take a few moments to brag about yourself as far as some of your college accolades.
All right. So I competed in track and field at Penn State University, and I got there by way of Saratoga Springs High School, where I was a sprinter and a discus thrower, shot putter. I still hold the school records in those events, in the shot put and the discus, and the Section 2 records, and then got into Penn State and tried to run hurdles there too. And they were like, no, you're coming to do discus, shot put, hammer, and the weight. And ended up at Penn State really because it ended up being the best fit for me in terms of proximity to home, and there were other people who from my school and area that were going to school there, so I knew that I could kind of find my niche. And the people on my recruiting trips, the student athletes who were recruiting me, were just so amazing, like just talking about the aspects of the university. So I think that was really huge for me. So while I was at Penn State, I was able to become the junior Pan Am champion in the discus, compete for the USA as a junior national athlete, and then went on to compete as a USA senior athlete. I ended up being the first female African-American NCAA champion for them in the discus in my 5th year of competing at Penn State. Had a stellar time there. And also competed when I was a sophomore at Penn State for the Olympic trials. I ended up 16th, and then competed again the year after I graduated in 2004 at the Olympic trials and ended up 8th. So they take the top 3. So I wasn't quite there, but continued to compete a little bit after that as well, doing the whole agent thing and figuring out how do I keep doing the thing that I love. And so it was a lot of very good times. So that's a little snippet about me.
No, and I'm glad you did it. So again, just in case y'all just, that kind of glossed over y'all's head, Division I scholarship athlete, record holder in high school, goes on to college, national champion in the discus. So really appreciate you hopping on it and just and having a willingness and a desire to really help out our student athletes and their parents, guardians with this process. And then another aspect that we can definitely get to is from the vantage point of a coach. So can you talk briefly about how you were also a college coach as well?
Yes, absolutely. So I started my coaching career as a graduate assistant at Penn State and then went on to become a volunteer assistant at Clemson University and then at a couple of D3 schools, SUNY Fredonia, St. Lawrence University, and then ultimately finished my career out at University of Albany, a Division I school, recruiting student athletes to come and be participants in track and field. While I was even at St. Lawrence, I really worked with all of the student athletes, you know, helping them and doing recruiting visits with a lot of different athletes. So I love that aspect of really telling and helping the student athlete figure out if this is the right place for them by showing them the different areas of the school. So not just the athletic piece, but really all the other parts as well. So like, how can I get involved if I want to do something artsy? How can I get involved if I want to do something in a club that's outside of athletics? So making sure that they are touching on all the parts that they really want to tap into for college experience.
And that's great. So like I said, we have someone who competed at the highest of levels in college, but then she also sat on the other side of the table when it came, to being a college coach. So really happy to have you on. And what I want to start with, I mean, a big central part of this show, I think is going to be related to fit, right? When deciding on a school, trying to make sure you do so from a standpoint of fit. But before we get to that, can you just talk about, obviously Penn State, it sounds like it worked out well for you, but is there, anything that you wish if you could have done a do-over when it came to the recruiting process? Were there any, pitfalls that maybe you just kind of want to advise our families from, mistakes that you learned from that you want to share with our families?
Yeah, I think definitely one of the pitfalls things that I fell into as I was picking the 5 schools to kind of go and visit was, I think at least 2 of the visits that I took were just because my friends were going to those schools and I was afraid to get on a plane by myself. Like I had never been on a plane. So this like overcoming like those fears. So like if I could go back and do it again, I would have visited maybe 2 other schools that were more in line with my goals and values. So that I maybe they would have been more in the running and Penn State might not have won out. But because I hadn't even had them in the running because I was like, oh, I'm just going to go to this other school because my peer is going there and they're taking their visit there and we can go together. I'm just going to do that. So I think really just having a mindset of what's best for me in this time and what's best for each student athlete as an individual, because your friend may not be going to that school that you're going to. So you don't want to waste a visit, basically, is how I think of it. Going there if it's really not somewhere you want to go. Like if it's a commuter school or if it's a school that really more people are from really far away or they live kind of close, so you see them go home a lot on the weekends and you're going to be 7 to 10 hours away and you're like, oh, I'll never get to go home on the weekend, like kind of thing. So
no, I
think
love
thinking
that
about
point.
those kinds of things.
Yeah, and even from a standpoint, so now we'll just do a little bit of teaching real quick. So at the Division I level, you're allowed 5 official visits, right? Now Division II, Division III, it's unlimited, although you can only go to each school one time, but you can go on an unlimited amount of visits. They don't really cap it. Now, but if you are that athlete who's gifted enough to get some official visits and invites to Division I schools, you only get 5 of those. So the last thing you want to do is waste them going to schools that you really don't see yourself going to, simply because, well, my friend's going there in that same weekend, and I want to travel with them. So that's a great point. You really want to make sure when you guys are going on these visits, these are schools that you really can see yourself at. And now it's just a matter of when you go on a visit, it's just a matter of seeing which schools you like more. But you want to take those visits extremely serious. And then speaking of visits, so while they're on campus, and you can take this from a standpoint of as a student athlete, but also so you can talk about your visit because you mentioned the athletes that were at Penn State, but then also as a coach from that angle, what are some things our student athletes should be doing while they go on their college visits?
I think really you need to be observing the culture of that team and how the coach interacts with the student athletes, how the student athletes interact with each other, how the other student body, like non-athletes, are interacting with the student athletes. Because if that's a value to you and you want to have a nice like family like atmosphere, then you want to see that happening on the team. If you're already starting to hear like people bickering, or this sprint group doesn't talk to this other group, or the forwards don't talk to the defense, or the linebackers don't talk, you want to listen to how each team member is interacting with each other, because you want to make a good decision, and you don't want to get into a place where you're going on a team where everybody's all cliquey or something like that. Or if it's you like that, then everybody's acting like a family, and you're like, oh no, that's not what I want. You want to make sure that you're finding the best fit for you in terms of your own personality, and only you know that. And maybe at 16, 17, 18, you don't know, but you know how you like to be with your current team. And so trying to find that fit for yourself at the college. So I think that that's really important. Just really having an idea and asking those questions and looking out for not necessarily majors either. Like you want to have your major there, but you want to know that you have options if you're not sure that that's the major you're absolutely wanting to do. You want to ask the questions, what will it take if I decide that I want to come in as pre-med? How hard would it be for me to transfer into architecture all of a sudden? Like, would you guys cover that? Would you cover me an extra year if I had to take extra credits? What is your policy on redshirting if I need to do that? Again, more terms I'm just kind of throwing out there, but
I love that. So
yeah.
real quick,
But
why don't you take a moment, because you did say your fifth year, and again, so we don't like to assume anything. A big part of Full Ride is, we want to give them winning plays and strategies, but we also just want to give them some knowledge. So take a few moments to talk about redshirting. What's that all about? And then how somebody could use that to their advantage as a student athlete.
Yes, absolutely. So you have 5 years to complete 4 years of eligibility in each sport. And so every school has a different policy on how they use a fifth year or a redshirt year for student athletes. In some sports, right off the bat, you're coming in as a freshman and they're going to redshirt you. You're not going to play. You're not going to compete in that first year because they're going to get you strong, teach you the way that they run the program, and then they're going to put you back out there. Some programs wait and see, oh, maybe you'll get injured or something will happen and you'll need to do a fifth year and use it that way. Sometimes it's based on your major. It just depends on the school, but you got to ask that question and say, hey, what's your policy on fifth year? How often do you get, and not every school, and if you're going to a smaller Division I school, some of them don't use their fifth years because it costs them money. And so you got to ask those questions and just think about that. If you're going to one of the Power Five, which is like just the conferences or the Power Five conferences, then they're going to be more likely maybe to use a fifth year and have the funds to be able to cover that for you. But using your fifth year, I used my fifth year. I graduated in 4 years from my academic standpoint, but I had a fifth year of eligibility athletically. And in that fifth year was able to negotiate with the school, with Penn State, that they would pay for my fifth year while I was competing, and I was able to start my master's program. So my first year of my master's program was covered under my full scholarship, just as if so that's the way that you can kind of use it and leverage it to your advantage, which I think is super important. And if you go in with your eyes open like that, I always tell student athletes to think about that. If you can finish the degree program that you are passionate about within 3.5, 4 years, and you know you're going to have a fifth year for whatever reason, then you want to talk to that coach about that and say, hey, look, would you be willing to cover my first year of my master's program so that I can walk out of here with both my bachelor's and my master's? So, because it's all about getting a job.
Exactly, and I know, and I'm so glad that we touched on it, because this is real strategic right here. This is also, and again, not every school allows you to do this, whether it's their budget or whatever the case may be. But this is the classic example of using the game. Don't let the game use you. So
Right.
if you are a strong student athlete, right, and like you just come, you're all about academics. Yes, you play sports, but you are serious about those books, and maybe you want to have a challenging major, or you want to go into a challenging, field. Well, and there's a good chance that in order for you to really get a job in your field, you have to at minimum get a master's degree. Well, then talk to those coaches about, hey, you know what, being able to pursue my master's while I'm here is important to me. So can you talk about, me redshirting at some point in time, so I have that fifth year? So use that to your advantage. If they really want you, they'll say, okay. And you can actually negotiate that to say, I want a redshirt and I want that fifth year, so on and so forth. So I think that's the great point. Now, on the flip side, maybe now this was me. I struggled my first year of college. It was just a big difference in competition. I was struggling in the classroom, and they were like, no, we're just gonna redshirt you so that you don't have to, worry about the games. Yeah, you got practice and all that, but you don't have to worry about games and everything. Focus on trying to bring your grades up. So it could actually work two ways, where you get that extra year, to kind of get acclimated to college. So I think that's just, this is really something for you guys to consider, as you're, again, going through your the recruiting process. And not everybody's going to be in that position. Some of you are just going to just got to take what the coach gets you. Like, hey, thanks for the scholarship.
That's right.
But, for some of our families who are student athletes, you guys, maybe you're high up on that recruiting board. Use that to your advantage to see if you can get that fifth year. And then it goes without saying, while you're there, if you get hurt for any reason, then a lot of times they'll give you that fifth year because of, because you're injured. So just think about that. But that's cool. What's a lesson that, once you got to college, what is, for that family that maybe they did get that scholarship and now they're going off to school, they're a student athlete. What's the biggest difference or biggest jump between, high school athletics and college? Help them mentally get prepared for the difference between the two sports, or between the two levels.
Yeah, I guess it depends on what high school program you come from, but the biggest difference really is that for me, it was like a job. Like, I felt like I needed to prepare, and it was a job that I took home with me. So it wasn't just the practices and the things that the coach was giving me in those 2-hour blocks of time or 3-hour blocks of time that we're practicing, but it was the other things that I needed to do outside of that. So I had to go to the training room to ice and to stretch and do all of those things. It's the study hall that I had to do so that I could keep my grades up, because it's required and it's mandatory to get those study hall hours in. So all the free time you think you have, you don't really have as a student athlete at the Division I level. It's because all of your time is really blocked out for things that you need to be getting done in the specific time. And especially if you're in like basketball or football or something like that, you're traveling during the week. And so or field hockey, soccer, all of those sports, you're traveling during the week. So you really have to time manage, energy manage, where you're putting your spaces of time and what you're doing. So the socialization ultimately becomes just with your teammates, and then in your classes for class projects, then you're either at the training room, you're at practice, you're at study hall. So that's the biggest difference. Whereas I feel like when you're in high school, you could go to practice, you go home, and you kind of can let it be. But in college, it's really everything is that sport and your academics.
Now, you said something, and I can relate to this. Playing Division I football. Now, it wasn't at a Power 5 school, but it's still Division I AA. I mean, that's a pretty high level, and And you said two things that are really stuck out to me, and I can relate. Yes, it is certainly a job. Make no mistake about it. You feel like it's a job, and it consumes you. But then also, it really teaches you about time management. You have to learn how to manage your time,
Mhm.
because you getting up early, especially at that Division I level. So that's something I think that could really segue into fit, because you may be a talent, you may be good enough to play at the Division I level, but the requirements of playing at that level from a standpoint of just time commitment, I mean, what they expect from you may not be in alignment with your long term goals. So, can you just talk about um, how can somebody really, you touched on a little bit earlier when it comes from a recruiting visit standpoint, but just big picture now, I'm just really hammering, like focusing in on this over the next couple of minutes. What are some steps that our student athletes can take to really help them, and maybe you can figure this out from your perspective when you were a coach, but like, how can they really go through the process of figuring out how a school, how a level, even 1, 2, or 3, is that right fit for them?
I think really being honest with yourself and asking yourself, how much time are you really willing to put into this? Because at whether it's Division III, Division II, or Division I, there's going to be an expectation of time that you need to put into it. And it's just the higher up the level, the greater time commitment is, in terms of distances you're traveling, and which again relates to your time. If you're not on campus, you're off on the road and you're doing whatever. So I think really asking yourself, what is the time commitment I'm willing to put into this? Because yes, it's 20 hours per week across the board of what the coaches can require of you when they're there with you, but it's all that extra time that you've got to put in so that you can play. Like, it's not just if you just want to go and be a part of the team, that's one thing, but if you want to go and be a contributing member in some significant way, then you got to put in all those extra time, those pieces that I talked about earlier of the training room, the stretching, the other things, and watching video and seeing what technique you need to be doing and seeing what your coach just told you and watching it over again and all of those things. That's where that Division I different time. So your talent can get you there, but you got to put in that work. You got to really put in that work to say, okay, what is my goal here? Am I trying to win a national championship? Am I trying to be a conference champion? What am I trying to do with this? Because we don't all go to be professionals in our specific sport, but we want to make good use of the time that we have to get to play it, right? Why waste our
Mhm.
time? So I think that that's really huge, is really thinking about that. And that's at every level, right? So if you're going to go play at Division III, you still got to ask yourself, you got to do the research and say, okay, what does it take to, if you're doing track and field, which is more of an individual sport, you're looking at the national list and saying, okay, what does it take to make the national team? You're looking at your team when you're asking, in a team sport, you're saying, okay, when's the last time you guys made a national qualifying championship? And what is it going to take for the people to be around me? And that's where the recruiting of the student athletes who are already on the team comes into play. And you're asking yourself, are they asking me the right questions, or are they just trying to take me to parties? Are they trying to win, or are they just trying to socialize? Like, what is the real thing here? Because for me, I'm like, I'm trying to win. And so if y'all not
Mm,
trying to win, I'm not trying to be here. So, you know,
mm,
at the end of the day, nobody's trying to waste their time. So for a student athlete perspective, and even when I was recruiting kids as a coach, I'm trying to see and watch and observe how they're interacting with the student athletes we already currently had. And then also looking at them to say, okay, are they setting their own standards? Are they asking the right questions to try and move us up a level, right? So
mm,
that was always one of my coach's things when she came in. And I was a sophomore. She was a brand new to our school. And she was like, we're moving up the ladder. We were eighth in the Big Ten when she came there. By the time she left, we had won I wasn't there. We were second the year I left. And then the year after I left, they were first. So that was in a 3-year time, but really
mm,
just hammering that in. Everybody was on the same page of, we're trying to move up the ladder. We're trying to do something here. So how can you be a contributing piece of this puzzle? So, and I think that that's really important to ask yourself is how do I fit in the puzzle of what this team is trying to do? And
And that's a great point. And there's a couple things to kind of touch on that. So again, now you were highly recruited, right? So you
yeah,
had a lot of options, choices, right? And I preach this to families all the time. Um, you can be more selective. You can drill down more on your needs, your wants, your preferences when you give yourself options, right? So
right,
you have to give yourself options. So like you're coming at it from an angle from a standpoint of like, well, I got 15, 20 schools, so now I can really kind of not nitpick, but I can really drill down on certain aspects, that are going to make me happy. So just a quick, lesson for our families, like, and this is why you got to put in that legwork at the beginning of casting a wide net, of being proactive, of reaching out to a number of schools, because then when you have 15, 20 schools to look through and evaluate, then it gives you that ability to really make a real decision because you know yourself. But if you only have 2 or 3 schools to choose from, well, then you kind of got to just make a decision that may not be your best interest.
that's
And the
it,
reason why I
right,
think about and the reason why I'm saying this is because you were in a position to be able to say, dude, like, how serious are you guys about winning? Because I think a lot of athletes don't understand this. If you are at a high school program right now, and let's say you're used to winning state championships, competing at the highest of levels, and being and not only winning, but then being around other high performers. And then you go to a college where dudes or girls are just kind of going through the motions. They're just happy to have a scholarship and they don't really care about winning. And you get a bunch of losses and you're getting dead last in your conference. That like can affect your college experience. So that's a
oh
great
yeah,
point, is like want to ask about the culture. And you can also just, with internet now, you can just look at the results for the
yeah,
last 5 years, 8 years, right? Like, where are these guys going? Are they just used to losing or what? So,
right,
and again, that can't be the number one factor. But I think
right,
quite frankly, it can't be. I can list a number of more important factors, but still, if you give yourself a number of options, the more options you give, this is the big takeaway. The more options you give yourself as far as schools, the more selective you can be. And I
yeah,
guarantee you, the more selective you can be, you reduce the likelihood of you getting to school, being unhappy, and then ending up, transferring. And that's what part of
yeah,
this is you want to avoid. You don't want to get to a school because you only had 1 or 2 offers. You took, okay, well, I got this offer, I'm gonna go here. Meanwhile, you can't stand the school. It's too far from home. It's too cold. The team isn't good. They don't even have your major. All those mistakes that athletes make a lot of times. So I think that's a great point that you made. But it all starts with options. But can you just put your coaching
yeah,
hat on for a quick second? What are some of the
yeah.
mistakes that you saw, whether it be from recruits, so something that a recruit did, said, asked, or anything you just witnessed, watching them compete, him or her compete? Like, was there anything that you just saw in an athlete while you were recruiting them that they did something you was like, okay, you know what, this person, you like cross them off the list because of something that they did?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of things like not responding to emails or responding to emails in text form. I'm done recruiting you. Like, I'm just like, you can't write a sentence. I'm gonna have to chase you down to be able to get your grades. And another thing
Mm,
for me is like if I see them blow up at their coach or at their parents while I'm at an event, watching, I nope. Because if you're going to yell at your parents like that, or you're going to yell at your coach who's been with you longer than, more than 4 years, then you would do that same thing to me. Nope, nobody has time for that. Like those kind of things are,
I love it. Ain't
those,
got time for that.
it's just like, okay, we're all, yeah. So those are like the major things that kind of stick out for me. Or if you lose poorly, because I think there's a way to lose as well as there's a way to win. So watching and observing how people win. So for me, it wasn't always about the numbers that you're putting up on the board. It's about how are you as an athlete, as a person, because I can teach you the skills, but I can't
Mm,
teach you to be a better person. So
mm,
really like those kind of things, like, are you a good winner? Are you a good loser? Do you have respect for those people who are supporting you in this hard moment? Do you have the ability to formulate your sentences and articulate what you want, um, and ask those right questions? Even in the
I love
recruiting
that.
process. So it's not even the questions I'm asking you, but it's the questions you're asking me that tell me about who you are.
And what's important to you, right? Like if they're not
Yeah.
really asking questions about the program, about the school, the environment, if your first question is, well, can I get my number? Like,
Yeah.
little stuff like that, guys. So it's important for you to have these questions. Um, yes, honestly, you should have these questions um, because it helps you make an informed decision, but also it's just to help you, even if it's here's the thing. I don't want to like teach our kids to mislead coaches or to lie, but
Right.
I will say this: even for some reason, if it's not all that important to you, it should be, by the way. But even if some of these questions aren't that important to you, still ask them because it puts you in the right light with a coach. It's like if
Right.
somebody, if your mom or your mom and dad, you can relate to this. You go on an interview and the person interviewing, they ask you all these questions the whole time, and then at the end, and they say, okay, sir or ma'am, do you have any questions for me? And if you don't ask a single question about the company, about the position, the culture, that's like a red flag to them, because like, wait, how interested are you if you can't come up with any questions? So it's really important,
Right.
athletes, for you to, with the help of your mom and dad, figure out 5 to 10 just questions that you want to ask a college coach, a program, the athletes, um, as you start this whole process. So I think that's a great answer. But then also the email, I laughed inside because people, again, we're so used to just shortening everything, doing shorthand, using emojis. There's a time and a place. So you got to know your audience, and the time
Yes.
to do LOL and FML, all those, whatever, some of these stuff, that is never the time to do that with a coach. So spell it all out, check your grammar, use correct, punctuation, all that stuff. Say Mr., Miss, or Coach. Just basic things that I think sometimes you may take for granted, but at the end of the day, this is honestly a job interview, and you want to always project
Yeah.
yourself in the right light. So you've been giving us some great information. If somebody wants to follow you on Instagram, on the web, because we haven't really talked too much about what you do today, but I know why don't you give an opportunity for our listeners to connect with you online and talk about some things that you are doing for student athletes and families, and just whatever you want to share. The floor is yours to do so.
Yes. So currently, right now, I'm working with student athletes to help them narrow down like some of these things about college and really say, okay, do I want to be a big fish? Do I want to be a little fish? Ask those questions. Start making a list, saying, okay, what colleges have you already looked at? What colleges have you thought about trying to be a part of? So those are really kind of the things that I'm working with student athletes with, and then also just kind of helping them tap into understanding their bodies and using and taking them through yoga for athletes and really doing those other things, because a lot of times we're just doing our one sport consistently over and over again, and so we're not tapping into the other parts of our body, so that allows us to have less injuries when we get into college, when you start doing more heavier lifting and different movements at the college level. So just working with families and helping parents understand how to support their student athletes. um, I'll honestly say my mom had no idea. She was like, whatever college you choose, it sounds good to me. But luckily, my high school coaches had given us a sheet of paper of saying, narrowing down what colleges we wanted to go to, what region we wanted to be in. Like, that's a big piece of it. That helps you narrow it down too. where do you want to look? Do you want to be in hot weather? Do you want to be in cold weather? Does it matter if you're able to fly home once or twice or 5 times to get home for vacations or whatever it is? So I think so that's what I'm working with student athletes with right now, helping them see how to be a part of the process. So,
And where can we
and you can
find you
find
on it?
me
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can find me on my website at renewedyouthy.com. You can find me on Instagram at Renewed Youth, and you can find me on Facebook at Renewed Youth as well. That's just REN as in Nancy, EWE ED youth.com. It's like I forgot how to spell.
But it's all right. Just don't worry about it, guys, because what we'll do in the show notes, I'll have all the information for Deshaya there too. That's funny. How do I spell my website? But I really, you've been great. One thing I do want to, because before I have you give us our winning play, I want to circle back to something because you said it earlier and I really want to talk about it. But you said coming out of high school, you were a sprinter and then you did a bunch of other events, right? And then you got to school and they're like, whoa, wait a minute. We know what you did in the high school, but you're not doing that here in college. This is what we expect you to do. So just for our families this is the big part of it, because now whether it's, particularly in football, a lot of times, you may think you're going there to play wide receiver, but then they put you at cornerback or, you know what I mean? So you get switched all the time. So, and even now track and field. So can you just talk about what athletes should be aware of as far as, what they can particularly expect once they get to school, as far as how a coach will use them, him or her, on the team?
So their coaches are going to use you to what is best for the team to help them win a championship. I mean, and that's just across the board. So if you come in and you may have come in as a forward, we're talking about soccer or something, and then they're like, we need a defenseman because so-and-so got hurt, so we're going to train you up to do that. Like, you just got to be ready, willing, and open to switch it up and start to train in that area, especially if you're there on full scholarship. Like, that's just part of the nature of the game. And so don't get tied to any one position. Just get in your mind that you're ready to be part of the team and do what's best for the team, right? Because it's not about just you. And that's what I think is super important. Like, I obviously knew that I wasn't going to get to hurdle in college, but it was something that I used to make me faster, I felt like, to be able to do the discus better or whatever. But you got to be able to be as much as you feel like we're leaders, and we are as student athletes, we're leaders in our own right with our other peers and things like that, but we have to be able to follow the coach, be coachable. And I think that that's really important today and always, especially with so much information that comes at you, that you can look on Google and you can look on YouTube and find different ways that other teams are doing it. But you got to buy into what your coach is doing. And if you feel like you can't buy into that program and what that coach is doing and how that coach is doing it, that's probably not a good fit for you, because the buy-in is really what helps you move forward. When you're able to buy into that program and buy into the way that they get things done, in terms of getting you strong and getting you more athletic and into the plays that they're doing, then it just makes it easier for everybody. And that's how the whole team moves forward. And that's the same way, and that's what employers are going to be looking for at the end of the day, to see were you able to buy in and be coachable in that way, so they can use you and hire you later on when you're done playing your sport. And that's what you're going to want to be able to talk to and speak about, which is another thing that I help student athletes be able to do, is use and talk about their transferable skills, that they learned on the field, which I think is so important, because you're missing that opportunity to talk to your employers and say, you want to hire me because I know how to get things done. I know how to set a goal. I know how to work on the team. I know how to be task oriented, and I know how to make sure and buy into the program and the vision that you have for this organization, for this corporation. And so you want me on your team doing the work for you to grow your business.
Spitting game. And you made a great point, because about the whole, first of all, about the whole after college, right? And I said this in the past, playing college athletics, and this is the number one thing. I mean, yes, hopefully you guys can, go pro. That's awesome. I never am that person that's going to tell somebody what they can and cannot do. So if that is your goal, go for it, work your butt off and make it happen. But for the other 99.9% of you that most likely are not going to go pro, playing college athletics, even if it's at the Division III level, even if you walk on, when you interview with somebody, with a company, they don't know if you're a full athletic scholarship player. They don't know if you're a walk-on. A lot of times they don't even care what level you play at. For you to be able to say, yeah, during college I played, I played on the team. And now you have a number of stories that you can share to promote yourself. And one of them is, hey, listen, I'm a very team player. I'm a good team player. Well, how? How are you a good team player? One example you could use is, well, you know what? Our team, we had an injury or we had a shortage, at this position. And my coach asked me if I would be willing to switch positions in order to help the team out. And I did. So not only did I show that I was, unselfish, but I also showed in doing so that I was coachable and able to and had a willingness to learn something new. You don't think an employer would love to hear that. So that's a great tip. And it was funny you talked about this because talk about doing what's best for the team. So one of my athletes that I worked with, I'll give him a shout out, Drew Smith. He's here from the Capital Region. And I remember when I was working with him, he was like really set on, he had a couple of schools that he had narrowed down to. And all the other schools wanted him to play running back. But SUNY Albany was the one school that said, well, we'll let you play quarterback. And I said to him, I was like, Jude, they'll tell you anything to get you to go to school. Like, I'm not calling them, the coaching staff, liars, but just know that if you get there and they need somebody to play running back, they're going to ask you to move to running back. And he was like, nah, they promised me. I was like, okay. And then literally he I think he, I don't know if he redshirt or not, but long story short, I kid you not, he is SUNY Albany's all-time leading touchdown leader at running back.
That's it.
He got there. They're like, yeah, Drew, we already got a good quarterback, and we really want you to get out in the field, though. So at first, I started off with, they let him play quarterback, like 5-10 carries a game, plays a game. And then finally, they're like, hey, let's just put you at running back so you're always on the field. You can get the ball 30 times a game. He was like, okay. So I still kid him to this day. I was like, I told you they're going to make you move. But that is, all kidding aside, you got to have an open mind at that level, especially if you are on full ride. So don't get married to a position. Be married to the opportunity.
That's right.
And the doors that it opens for you. So think big picture. All right. Give us your winning play. What is the winning play for our student athletes that, them or even their parents, that they can all do together to really take control of the process and make an informed decision at the end of the day? What's your winning play for our families?
Winning play is start early, setting up the question list, ask those questions, and find the best fit for you. Don't worry about everybody else. What's the best fit for you? So really narrowing that down, and from a wide range at first and just narrowing it down. That was a lot of words. I don't know if that was
No, I think Nah, that was a great answer as always. I just can't thank you enough. You dropped some value all episode long, and I know our fans are gonna find value. For everybody else who are listening, I thank you as well for tuning in. But as always, this is your college recruitment and athletic scholarship coach, Kito Delgado, reminding you that college recruitment starts with you. What steps are you taking today to earn an athletic scholarship tomorrow?